Hey, I'm Lana from Lana Glowshot Art, and today I'll be unboxing the August 2023 SketchBox. With the supplies in this box, you'll get to wear the hat of a product designer as you learn how to build up more complex forms with simple shapes and how to render value really efficiently. The surface in this month's box is the Borden & Riley Bristol Smooth Heavyweight Paper. This thick, sturdy paper is perfect for pen, ink, and marker. The next product in the box is the Olo marker, which is actually two markers in one. One end is the Cool Grade number 3, which is a chisel tip marker and is perfect for laying down large, even areas of coverage. The other tip is the Cool Grade number 5, which is a little bit darker and features a brush tip. Using the darker ink and a wet-on-wet technique, I'm creating a gradient. The ink underneath is still a tiny bit wet, so when I go over the top, I'm able to achieve a smooth transition of color. Then I go back over towards the right and add another layer of my darker Cool Grade number 5. Here, I'm coming over the top with Cool Grade 3 to transition just a little bit more. When you turn the chisel tip on its side, you now have a point that can get into the nooks and crannies and add definition to your shapes. The brush tip is a little bit more painterly. You can change the line just with pressure. Here I'm pressing down a little bit harder and then I'm easing up. Brush tips are also great for laying in color really quickly. Using the Goldfaber pencil from this month's box, let's warm up by practicing some of the techniques product designers use when drawing out their concepts. I'm going to draw a box in one-point perspective. One-point perspective is an incredibly crucial tool for product designers so that they can show the objects they're designing from multiple perspectives. Let's begin with a simple box. And to do this, you're going to start by drawing one face of the box, which for me is going to be a rectangle. Once you have the rectangle sketched on your page, take each of the corners of the rectangle to the vanishing point. You can use the machine cut edge of one of the pieces of paper in your pad to do this, and that'll ensure really straight lines. To complete the box, draw a horizontal line for the back top edge, and then draw a vertical line for the top side edge. Then you can use the Pentel Soft High Polymer Eraser from this month's box to erase any extra lines still going to the vanishing point. Now let's play around with this. I want a box to go through the other box. This is called interpenetration, and it starts the exact same way with the front face of the box. I'm using my machine cut edge to keep the edges of my box parallel, and then each corner goes to the vanishing point, including the corner that is intersecting the box that I drew originally. Once all of the edges are to the vanishing point, I cut the box and then refine the edges and erase any extra lines. Here I'm identifying my light source and I'm drawing a sun in the top left corner so that I can visualize where the light source is hitting my box, which means that the right side of my box is going to all be in shadow. This is a very small portion of my box, so I'm using the chisel tip. I also know that the front of my box is going to be a little bit darker because the light source is behind. So again, I'm using the Cool Grade 3 chisel tip to create that darker shadow on the front face of my box. To really distinguish the front face from the side face, I'm using the Cool Grade 5 brush tip to add a little bit more depth and dimension to that right side. Here I visualized the light source and identified that there is a cast shadow being cast by the boxes that I drew, and I'm using those to create a little bit more form and dimension. For box number 2, I'm starting with a square and then taking 3 of the corners to the vanishing point. For this box, I want to cut a hole in it. So I'm going right into the front face and cutting a hole by drawing a square within the square. Now that there's a hole in the box, I can see a little bit of the top and the side of the box, and I'm going to illustrate this by drawing the top corner to the vanishing point and then creating the back of the box with a horizontal and vertical line. After erasing all the extra mark, I can begin adding some depth and dimension with my Olo markers. After taking some time to visualize my light source, I identified that the inside and the bottom of the box would be the darkest. So I hit all of these surfaces with a Cool Grade 3 and then came over the top in a few areas with the Cool Grade 5. As you explore this Olo marker and the concept of one-point perspective, I challenge you to play around with a couple other concepts, including the idea of cutting into the form and creating round edges like I'm doing in this quarter cylinder. You can also play around with how the boxes touch or interact. Here I am floating one box on top of another and creating space between, whereas here I am stacking the boxes with one surface flush with the other surface. As you play around and explore these different options, I encourage you to keep the concept of form, which is this month's prompt, at the forefront of your mind. The next product in this box is the Copic alcohol marker featuring two different tips, a brush and a chisel tip. I'm layering over the top of this swatch with the brush tip to create a feathered edge. And when it's combined with the Rembrandt pastel in this box, I'm able to create a really nice soft gradient. To do this, I lay a medium amount of pastel right over the top of the marker base. Then I use the blending stumps in this month's box to smooth the pastel and create that gradient from the darker value in the marker area to the lighter area as it becomes transparent over the white paper. Then you can use the Pentel eraser in this month's box, specifically that hard, sharp edge, to erase out crisp highlights. The last product in this box is the Sarasa Green Fine Liner, which is an excellent product to refine the edges and details in your product designs and also to pump up darker values. Here I am creating a value scale from dark to light, and I'm making darker values by cross-hatching more and laying down more ink in the darker areas. I'm going to showcase how all of these green products work together as I draw a cylinder. We need that top portion, which when I look at it straight on is a circle, but when I tip it back away from me, it becomes an ellipse. So to draw an ellipse, I create a vertical axis and a horizontal axis, and then I trace over this area several times until I actually capture that nice solid ellipse. I never get this right the first time. I always need to go over this several times to find that ellipse. Then I draw two straight lines down from the edges of the ellipse, which are the sides of the cylinder, and then another ellipse on the bottom for the base. After erasing that back edge of the cylinder, it's time to come in with the Copic marker. And I am emphasizing that green on both sides, but more on the right side because I've identified that my light source is coming in from the top left. Feathering the edge of the green shape allows me to emphasize the three-dimensional form of this cylinder and also creates a softer edge for me to blend the pastel into. Once I've applied the pastel in that same rounding stroke, I blend it with my blending stump, and then I work back in with the pastel to add a little bit more value. There's a little bit of dust on the surface, and I use that to drag into the lightest areas. I want a little bit of value in those areas so that I can erase some highlights out. The final touch is using the fine liner to add a little bit more structure and to define the edges. You'll notice that I didn't draw all the way around the top of the cylinder. I left some of the edges open and broken, and that allows the form to feel a little bit more three-dimensional. I'm going to draw one more cylinder and change up the materials a little bit. So I start it the same way with an ellipse on the top and the bottom and two vertical lines connecting the two. Then I come in with that feathered edge with the Copic green marker. This time I'm going to add the Olo marker, starting off with the Cool Gray 3. And this particular cylinder is going to be hollow. So I'm going to draw the inside using the Cool Gray 3 and the Cool Gray 5. Using the gray allows me to push my value range a little bit more and is a great option if you want to really push the darks in the object that you're drawing. I finished this piece off again with the fine liner, using it in much the same way that I did on the shorter cylinder. Now I'm going to put all these products together the way that a product designer would, and I'm going to illustrate a hairdryer. I'm starting out with the ellipses, and I use that to build the nozzle of the hairdryer and the body, and then I connect that with sloping lines so that it all feels really three-dimensional. Once I've got a really strong pencil sketch, I switch over to the fine liner. Although the fine liner is really good at laying down a consistent mark, I like to play around with the weight of my line, meaning that some areas the line is heavier and darker, and in other areas it's lighter and possibly even broken. If you like that more sketchy, unfinished look, you can leave the pencil lines. If not, you can erase them once your ink is dry so that you have a more polished presentation. Once the line work was complete, I came in with the Olo marker and began working on the nozzle of the hairdryer. I kept these all in the gray family so that it would read more like chrome and it would look more metallic. I then introduced the greens into the body of my hairdryer and came in over the top of that first green layer with the Cool Gray 3 and the Cool Gray 5. That allowed me to push the value a little bit more. Once the darks in my hairdryer were established, I moved into the cast shadow, which is the shadow that the hairdryer makes on the table. I really wanted this to feel grounded and that it was on a surface. Then I followed this up with the pastel, applying pastel over the top of the marker, blending with my blending stump, and then pulling some highlights out with the eraser. My last step was finishing details with my fine liner. And after I stood back and took a look at this, I realized that that cast shadow needed to be a little darker, so I popped in with some Cool Gray 5. And now this piece is complete. I hope you learned a ton about rendering forms in this video, and we can't wait to see what you create. So be sure to use the hashtag SketchBoxAugust when you post your work online. For more unboxing videos and tutorials, you can check out our YouTube channel where you can like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. See you later.